Well, all right, everybody, good morning and good afternoon to some of you, and welcome to another Aplos webinar. This is our February edition of Aplos Learning Webinars, or what we call advanced webinars, an opportunity for people to learn and listen and hopefully interact a little bit about various nonprofit topics. I'm Dan Kimball, and I'm the host of this particular webinar, and I get the opportunity to facilitate each month a chance for nonprofits to get together and kind of do some online chatting and all of that. So we're so glad you're here. Like I said, for some of you, it's morning. For others, it's afternoon. We're so fortunate that we get opportunity people from really all over the country that listen in and interact. So we're so glad that you can participate today. So today's topic is kind of a fun one. It's one that might be new for some of you and maybe repeat for others. And it's how to write and implement a successful fundraising plan. It's a topic that I certainly love to talk about in my past fundraising background and the various nonprofits that I've had an opportunity to work for. It's been a real critical part of the success of any fundraising shop. So I want to kind of assure you, if you've never done one before, fear not. We'll kind of hopefully walk you through some real easy basic steps of how to do one. And if you're a seasoned fundraiser and you're just kind of checking us out, know that hopefully there'll be some tips and tricks that will kind of add to your already expertise, or you can actually pipe in and give me some suggestions. The great thing about fundraising and the business that we're all in terms of nonprofit leadership, whether you work for a small nonprofit or a church or any size nonprofit, is that we're always learning, right? I mean, I feel like I've been doing fundraising for over 20 years professionally, but also as a volunteer for more than that. And I feel like I never stop learning. So that's the great thing about it. We can always keep learning. So if you are a social media user and you're on Twitter, we like to interact. You can use the hashtag Aplos webinar, or you can check us out at either at Fugitive DMK, which is right there on your screen, or at Aplos Software with the underscore there. So welcome aboard, and we're going to kind of get things going. And again, so glad that you're with us today. So by way of introduction, first of all, a preface, and I'll say it again throughout, all of the slides will be available to you. We record all of our webinars, and we make those available on our Aplos Academy. And so shortly after this webinar, we'll have a link to our website, and you can watch this later, have the slides, share this with your board, share it with your staff, watch it again, sell it on the internet. Well, hopefully you're not going to do that, but you know what I mean. So just by way of introduction, just know that many nonprofits, particularly smaller ones and startups, operate without a fundraising plan. This is something that I found true as I kind of survey and talk to nonprofits throughout. A lot of times someone has an idea for an event or a campaign, and, typically what happens is people will put together a committee or a volunteer group, and they just kind of go for it. They'll sit around and say, hey, how can we raise some money? And they might send out a letter here or there. They might do some donor meetings, but when the, bank account seems low, they often go into this, what I call panic mode. They race around trying to find cash to keep your doors open. So this is common. It's not unlike because we know going into these webinars that as a nonprofit leader or a church leader or a parachurch leader, whatever space you come from, we know that you're busy. We know that you've got a lot on your plate, and one more thing to plan can be very difficult. So, but I just want to, say that doing that sort of what I call reactive kind of fundraising is not the best way to run development. So even if you're feeling good today and you're flush with cash, running an unorganized and unplanned fundraising operation is a recipe for more stress, more headaches, and ultimately financial ruin. So, for many nonprofit organizations, raising money, it can be the most challenging issues they face. Probably the most common question I get here at Aplos is, how do I raise more money? How can I find more donors? So finding the donors and the dollars to advance your mission and grow your organization, it really does require planning and follow through. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is just putting together that plan, putting together that roadmap. How can you, and hopefully the result will be, not only, more dollars for your organization, but less stress for you as a leader. So, if you can kind of ride along with me and kind of think about the fundraising plan, it's a roadmap. It really, what is it? It's a guide to help you organize your goals, plans, and timelines. And what I think it will do is, along the way, it will help you meet your financial goals. I like to use kind of the description as sort of like your Google map. It's going to get you from point A to point B. But just like any kind of mapping system, there's going to be some detours along the way from time to time. So this thing isn't going to necessarily going to be 100% set in stone all the way through. There's going to be some adjustments that need to be made, but at least going to give you a guide, kind of where you need to go, where you need to be along the way. So, some things we're going to talk about during this webinar. We're going to hopefully walk you through everything you need to know how to develop a strong and practical fundraising plan that you need, regardless of your size and budget of your nonprofit. This is not designed for a big shop or just a small shop. I think everybody can take away something in this. Some of the things during this webinar, hopefully you'll learn, is why you need a written fundraising plan and how your organization can best use it. A simple step-by-step process for writing that plan, how to plan and assess the best strategies for your nonprofit, and some components of a strong fundraising plan. And then finally, how to get everyone involved and engaged in your fundraising plan. And the really fun thing about this webinar and this is that there's going to be a lot of samples. So hopefully you'll find those to be useful and adapt those for yours. Yes, and already we have a couple questions. People are asking about the availability of the slides, and yes, these will all be available for you. And like I said, this webinar is recorded. So let's get into, why even do a fundraising plan? What's the purpose? Why bother? You got so many things to do. Well, I call this a roadmap for success. A solid fundraising plan is just like I said earlier, it's like your Google map. It's getting from point A to point B. Gives you sort of that direction, because if you don't do one, you're going to get so distracted so easily. As you all know, it's so easy for a board to give you some direction, or something happens, or you have to kind of do something last minute, and all of a sudden, those plans can go out the window. So if anything, it's just kind of keep you on guide for your year. And on this one, we're talking about fundraising, but you can really use this for the other components of your organization as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit. The other thing is, a fundraising plan will help you move from reactive to proactive, and I talked about that a little earlier. The most common example that I get is you get a great idea, or you get encouraged by maybe the community member or people on your board to do something, and maybe you think, well, we have the resources and we can pull it off, and all of a sudden you're in reactive mode instead of thinking ahead, thinking through the steps, thinking through the timelines. Timelines are going to be a big part of this that we're going to talk about. It also helps gets everyone on the same page. And when I talk about everyone, I mean your directors, your staff, your volunteers, your board. And if there's one thing I can, not emphasize enough, which is, it's not all on you. As a leader or an executive director or a head of fundraising of your shop, whichever hat you're wearing today, please know that you cannot do it alone. So part of this is designed to help get everyone involved and everyone on the same page, so they're all thinking alike. And then a good fundraising plan helps with detailed tracking, which is useful for evaluation and improvements. I can't think of a better way to say, should we do this event again? Should we do this particular strategy again? Is, well, you need to have, information. You have data. How did it go? Did we raise any money? Did people show up? And then how did my staff do? How did my volunteers do? So you'll see here, I put a quote in here. The fundraising authority You can Google the Fundraising Authority. You can follow him on Twitter. But Joe Garrett has a great thoughts. But I love this quote: "A written plan will give you guidance on strategy and tactics when you are in the thick of events, mailings, and calls. In short, your fundraising plan will keep you sane." This is the thing I love about it the most. Hopefully, it's kind of like your to-do list. Some of you more organized folks might have that. So hopefully you'll see that the fundraising plan it really does have a purpose. It's not just to kind of keep you busy or give people busy work. Hopefully this is another way to look at it. There's a lot of creative ideas out there. Kind of having some fun with this. So I just want to ask the question, do you want to go from, like I said, proactive to reactive? I think the first example here in the cartoon is let's earn some quick money. And the result is a good fundraising plan will hopefully equal into a lot of money and really a lot of momentum for your nonprofit organization. So let's start off by saying, before you begin to even write a good fundraising plan, it's really important to review and evaluate what is working and what possibly needs to go. So this is critical for any organization. I think this is something that organizations should do on a regular basis of any type, whether you feel like you're highly successful or you feel like you're in the weeds and struggling. I think reviewing and evaluate what's working and what needs to go is a great way to do. So, the old evaluation used to be called a SWOT analysis, which is your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats. And those kinds of things. So that's it's a great thing. So just real simply, review how did it go last year, and you can do this for each particular strategy, each particular program. You can do it overall. Like for example, let's say your organization needed to raise $100,000. Write that number down and then ask, well, how did it go last year? How much did you raise? What about the previous? And I'm going to say 3 years. What worked well? Maybe you have 1 or 2 signature events that seem to always be working well, and they're tracking, a growth every year. What did not go well? Did you have an event or a program that completely bombed? Write that down and circle it, and let's look at it. Let's add together the things that were part of that. Sometimes you can maybe not raise a lot of money, but you can raise a lot of awareness, and maybe the event breaks even. So you think, well, we didn't maybe raise a lot of money, but we didn't lose money, but we sure did get a lot of people there. Okay, that's not necessarily mean it's a bad event. So that's, you want to be careful when you think that when we say what did not work well, it's not always about making lots of money, but it's about, is this the best use of my staff, my volunteers, and are people hearing our message? And so when we talk about strategies throughout this webinar, we're really talking about the different channels or different ways in which you're raising money. Your grants program, your special events, your golf tournaments and your galas and your car washes, those kinds of programs. Your direct mail, if you're doing direct mail, that's the when you're sending either email or snail mail to your donor base. Major gifts. That's some shops have their own program, their own major gifts program. I see a question here about the definition of major gift, and I'll come back to that at the end. But a major gifts strategy for every organization, it could be a little different. I've worked in organizations where $10,000 and above was considered a major gift. I came from another organization where that was more along 50,000 above. It was a much larger organization. Monthly giving lapse donors, you can see some of the examples here. So as we think about it, we start building out your annual plan, your fundraising strategies. These are the kind of strategies we're talking about. And let me also say, this is not to suggest you should have all of these. These are just different ways that I know of. So you might only do 2 or 3, which is great. You might want to grow. So review and evaluate is a great way to start. You can do it by program. You can do it by your revenue. whatever kind of works in terms of what you're doing. This is a great time of year to do this webinar because it's early in the year. So even if you have just kind of getting going, it's never too late. So a lot of the nonprofits that use Aplos and a lot of ones I work with are they have a January through December sort of fiscal year. A lot of you guys out there have a July 1 through June, and even I know other fiscal years start in September. So it doesn't really matter when. It's still always a good time to review and evaluate and work towards a plan. So what are some of the components of that fundraising plan? So you've done some evaluation, you figured out kind of what works and maybe some areas you need to improve on. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty. Well, first and foremost, you got to set your goal. What are you trying to raise? What's the end point that you have in mind? What's your ultimate goal? What's your overall fundraising goal? What is your overall fundraising goal for this year and for each of the next, I'm going to say 4 years. That's a good measuring stick. To go by. Of course, that can change a lot, but it's good to think ahead a little bit. Do you want to do $100,000 for the next 2 years? Do you want to grow? Do you want to double? Do you want to triple? Just like you would a business plan. It's the same ideas. And the other thing about the fundraising plan is it's not just dollars. As you sit here, here's some other goals you can set. The number of dollars you want to raise, the number of current donors you want to renew. So that means that maybe you have 300 current donors in your database, and hopefully you're using a database. If you're not, certainly we can talk more about what Aplos does, but there's tons of great donor management software out there. But be tracking who your donors are, and you want to make sure that they're coming back to you every year. So how many current donors do you want to renew? 100%? If you do, that's great. How many new donors do you want to acquire? So those can be the other goals within your fundraising plan. And one thing that's really important, you shouldn't just kind of, grab a number out of thin air. You really want to think it through based on what you have, based on some of the trends, that you have. If you have a board member or a community comes to you and says, well, how come we don't have the same number as, the hospital or, something like that, or the Boys and Girls Club, be sincere. Compare apples to apples in terms of the size of your organization, the staffing, the capacity, all of those kinds of things. Set realistic goals. It should be based on the needs of the organization. How much money will your group need to raise in order to carry out the activities that you want to carry out? In other words, wouldn't it be grand if we all got $1 million from a secret donor? But really, how much do you need? What are you ultimately trying to do? Are you trying to just keep the doors open and the lights on, or do you have new programs you're trying to launch? Are you busting at the seams in terms of the needs of services that you're providing, whatever that is? So those are all the kinds of things we're talking about. If the goal answers the question, how much money do you need? Then the mission answers the question, what do you need? So what is your organization's mission? What do you plan to do with the money you raise? And what is your operating budget? And why is it that amount? Does that kind of make sense? Good. So it's really important, just like anything, you're always going back to the mission, who you are, why do you do what you do? And I think that gives a nice conversation piece to not just say, hey, we just need to raise money because we need to raise money. We need to raise money because fill in the blank. So those are some of the components as we're getting going. So setting that goal. Next thing you want to do is decide on your strategies. Look at what you currently do. I've listed here probably the most common fundraising strategies that I'm aware of: grants, special events, direct mail, major gifts, monthly giving. Lapsed donors is a strategy. That means those are people that once gave to your organization and no longer give. A lot of organizations, that's its own strategy. What are we going to do to bring some of those donors back to our program? Why did they leave? Is it a tracking issue? Is it are we not calling them enough? Are we not talking to them enough? So on and so forth. Online giving, this is huge. And I was reminded last month about this, is that it's really important to put social media and that online opportunities as a major strategy. Membership, those of you who have membership programs, that would be like if they are like an alumni, or it's like $25 a year to be part of a, a lot of zoos do membership. Here locally, we have the, Jazz Society and places like that. Corporate sponsorships, product sales. Product sales might be maybe you are have a relationship with a certain vendor, and a certain percentage of a sale of something comes back to you, or you actually sell product as a nonprofit, which is all fine. So these are goals for each of the tactics that add up to your total goal. So for example, if you need to raise $5,000, you may say that you need to raise $3,000 through a major donor group and $2,000 through an event. So the different ways in which you're going to get to that total goal is the strategies. And from here on through the rest of the webinar, that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on. And again, just want a couple reminders that if you are active on Twitter, you hear anything, you have any advice, suggestions for other fundraisers, just use the hashtag Aplos webinar. You can tweet me directly at FugitiveDMK, which is FUGATIVE and then also we are recording this, and this will be available for you. So let's make sure this all works, what we just talked about. Your strategies, your goals, how much to raise, so on and so forth. So here's a real simple kind of worksheet that you can copy if you want. Again, some of you, you can be creative. You can do this in a Word document using columns. You can do it in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure some of you are much more creative than I am, and you can, make it colorful and as pretty as you want. But this is the core basics of what you're looking at. You see I put some strategies in the left column, your goals in the middle, and dollars to raise, number of renewed donors, number of new donors. And not every box needs to necessarily be filled. You might have some other strategies that I'm not thinking of, and certainly use your own creativity there. So this would be sort of kind of the macro, sort of the 10,000 foot level view. And then later on in the webinar, we'll kind of get into the more specifics, kind of more in the weeds kinds of things. So just make sure kind of what we said makes sense. Make sure you said you want to raise $100,000. Those columns should all total $100,000, and the number of donors and new donors that you set as that goal. Strategy details. So let's kind of get into a little bit. So again, strategies, those haven't changed on the left. There's going to be a little description. Maybe, for example, the grant writing, you're going to say, we're going to write to 2 or 3 local community banks. Who's your target audience? What's your goal? What's the cost? Who will do it, and by when? So now we're getting into kind of the more kind of the details of kind of spreading this out. So each of these columns, again, is a good way to track. And it's important that you know who your target audience is, because, for example, your special event might have a very different target audience than, say, your direct mail. An example of that is a direct mail is typically going to go to people that you already have in your database, unless you go out and buy a list and you're doing a blind direct mail. Whereas a special event, that could be open to the community. Maybe you're doing a barbecue, or a gala dinner. Well, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for people that maybe don't know your organization. So it's really a great way to describe who is your target audience, what is it, what exactly is that event, and how much, your goal, and then your cost, and who will do it and by when. So hopefully that's kind of easy. So let's kind of see how this all starts coming together. So again, we identified our targets. And those are our various, our dollar or our numbers, our strategies, grants, corporate giving, so on and so forth, and then our action plans. Let's start putting this together. It's going to look something like this. You want to raise $125,000. This is just a kind of a made-up scenario. You want to renew 65% of your current donor base. And by the way, I want to make sure I say on that this is a huge thing. If you do any kind of research, you'll know that if you're keeping 60 to 70% of your donor base renewing every year, you're doing a great job. In other words, it's not uncommon for nonprofits across the country on all sizes to lose 40, 50% of their donors from year to year. It's a lot of work. So people spend a lot of time and effort to keep donors engaged in those. There's various reasons why, and we have a whole other webinar we've done on that, and we'll continue to talk about, and that's donor renewal. So let's just suppose for this scenario, you're going to attempt to keep 65% of your donors, and you on the law, and the same time, you want to acquire 200 new donors. So there's then how are you going to do it? You break that down. You're going to do $25,000 in grants, $50,000 major gifts, $50,000 special events, and then action plans, which we'll get into. Does that make sense? Good. Couple of you, yep, good question. We'll deal with questions here in a little bit. All right, so now I took that kind of that basic plan, and now I've kind of filled it in with some examples to sort of see how this kind of blends, and does it kind of make sense for you? Does it work? So again, I put some strategies on the left column, and again, very simple, easy way to do this. I mean, you really shouldn't, you don't need to spend a lot of money or effort on something like this. What I did for the sake of this is sort of a format I've been using for, good 10 years minimum. I like Excel. You can do this in a Word document as well, but just, get some columns out there. Of course, the more detail you get, the more room you need, but you'll see here we're going to do an intimate dinner party. Our goal is $10,000. We're going to have 12 people charge for dinner and ask for donation at the end. Who's my target audience? Well, 3 couples, key board members, 3 donors, and 3 prospects identified by board and staff. By the way, that's a real effective fundraising strategy as a small dinner. And then you see here some of the you have a menu, special guests, video, the other things you need. Who's going to do it, when, and the cost. How much are you going to spend for food? Are you doing a caterer? Are you hiring out things? Do you need to rent tablecloths and dishes and all the various things that come in that cost? So as you can see, you can take just one column and blow it up and have its own kind of sub column, just putting in the details. But these are the kinds of things where if they're written down, they're much easier to go to instead of thinking, you're a week before the event and you're like, oh my goodness, we forgot, fill in the blank. So you see here, direct mail campaign. It's going to 8,000. Our goal is $8,000. We're going to mail to 2,000 people. And we're going to mail it to donors who have given in the past 3 years. Okay, so great. We're going to develop the message, materials needed, who's going to do it, date to mail, and post on the website, or post on the website if you're doing it online, and the cost. I find that when you work backwards on events, it's really helpful on your timeline. So for example, let's take direct mail. This is the one that I see a lot of people get caught up in doing these things last minute because they think, well, how hard is it to write a letter? That's simple. Well, it might be easy to write the letter, but you want to have it, edited. You want to have it, put on nice letterhead. You need to work with a mail house. You need to print out your mailing list and go through your mailing list. You want to make sure there's no duplications. You want to make sure your mailing list is up to date, people who have moved or who have asked to no longer be on your list. You kind of see suddenly you go from a few hours to many hours of work just getting that ready. So in your timeline on especially things like direct mail, I would say, when do you want your mail piece to drop? When do you want it to be in the mailboxes, or when do you want people to get it? So to say 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, then work backwards from there. So as you see, while, it seems like, well, November, that's so far away. All of a sudden, August, you should be writing that stuff if you're doing that correctly. So here's a couple other examples real quick. You see a, charity fund run, corporate donation support. These are, again, examples. I think hopefully you can kind of get the gist of what needs to go in here, for your plan. So, and like I said, you'll get copies of this as we go. So from here, what are you going to do? Well, let's build a timeline. This is key. This is where I think a lot of organizations do stumble a little bit. They come up with a solid budget. They have a great mission. They get a plan that includes a solid group of fundraising tactics, but they fail to set a timeline, and thus they never seem to get things done, especially around events. I see this more than anything because events, man, the calendar just comes up so quick. I mean, all of a sudden we're like, it's January. And then before you know it, it's March. And certain things haven't even been done yet. So it's easy to get on the phone and like hold the location, but it's all the little things like getting committees together and getting promotion materials and printing and that's also allowing for things that might come up suddenly. So if you hold an event in April, you send out a mail-in in September, you run a board giving campaign in November. So just basic timelines. I prefer a more detailed timeline for every activity or event that not only is the big picture goal, but also all the small goals. Consultants out there, they call this critical path, which is just very detailed planning. So instead of just a listing that we're having an event in April, I want to see when decisions on the venue and entertainment need to be made. Little check boxes for your staff and volunteers to participate in, when sponsors will be solicited. If you're going to do an event in the spring of 17, you'll want to be talking to potential sponsors in the fall of 2016. The reason is because a lot of corporations, they make their funding decisions early in the year. So it's those kinds of things, when your invitations are going to go out. So I'm really big on taking that, this right here and really kind of blowing it up and making a very specific timeline for the timeline for each thing. Whichever type of timeline you include one. It will force you to think critically through your fundraising decisions, and it will provide invaluable guidance on your activities as the year progresses. And you can also adjust, just like a map. You're going along, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you decide that you need to change the venue, or you need to change something, or whatever that is. I think everybody that's been in fundraising long enough knows that there's going to be some changes along the way. It allows you to you kind of adjust along the way. So build that timeline, get those timelines out there, build it out. You can do it, top to bottom might be a way where you take kind of the plan that I did a few slides ago, put the activity in and then just kind of go top to bottom in terms of, by month, if it's a long term kind of event. And then just like a program or organizational budget, each strategy needs a budget and a goal. So if you're doing direct mail, and you're doing an event, and you're doing major gifts, and you're doing, so on and so forth, you want a budget for each one of those. How much are you going to spend? How much are you going to raise? And this becomes really important because some strategies cost more. Direct mail can tend to be an expensive way to gain donors and gain money because of the cost of postage and printing and all of that, unless you're doing it online, which is great. It's not to say you don't do it, but it's also to say that when it comes down to look at your budget, you want to find out what's the most cost effective for each strategy. And then finally, who's your team? This is a biggie. Decide and assign everyone who's going to help implement. This includes board members, volunteers, program staff, community members, etc. Typically, what a lot of nonprofit organizations do, especially the smaller ones, is that they'll put their own staff on there and they'll leave it at that. But it's really important. This is a great way to involve people. I'm really big on this. If you've listened to some of my other webinars, you know that involving volunteers, involving board members is huge. It's even great to even have committees for the various fundraising strategies. I was a part of a fundraising team at a local children's hospital, and we had this annual gala, and we had a whole volunteer committee for that gala. The great thing is it allowed our staff to kind of work on some of the other aspects of the fundraising, and this group of people, they could work on, some of the details, like the table decorations and those kinds of things. So who's your team? Get, and list them out, call them up and list them out. All right, so let's work that plan. So you've got the plan in place, and now we get into an action plan. So for each strategy that you plan to use, I would just fill out a separate page with the following information. And again, you can format that. This isn't about format. This is about the information on the page. And I'm sure you can probably create a different looking form that works for you. But again, list the strategy, list the projected income. And again, we want to talk about gross. How much did you make is a common question. Well, we made 100,000. Well, how much did you spend? The total cost, and I'll show you the chart in a minute. Net income after expenses, other goals that this will meet. So again, we talked about this a little earlier, but this, you might have an event and it could be a fundraising event. So donor appreciation events, for example, you don't want to do a donor appreciation event and ask them for money. You want to do a donor appreciation event as a way to get people to come to your nonprofit or somewhere together to thank them and celebrate them. It's going to cost a little money, but you're not necessarily going to specifically ask for new donations. So it's okay. Just make sure it's in your strategy. Same with generating publicity or acquiring new donor types of events. So either way, just make sure you kind of list what the objective is of a certain strategy is. And then, of course, the number and staff volunteers needed to carry out the strategy. This is very helpful because if you do this early in the year, you can then start kind of assigning and getting a better sense of what you need where. I've had the opportunity to volunteer for organizations, and I still enjoy volunteering. And one of the biggest frustrations I have is when I call an organization and I say, hey, I'd love to volunteer, and they don't really quite know what they need, or they're like, well, we'll get back to you. Well, if you have a good fundraising plan, and you know that there's an event coming up in July and it needs 25 volunteers, they could say right off the bat, we've got this event in July, we'd love to plug you in there. So it really helps you plan out not only your budget, but also your staffing needs, because, like anything, people go on vacation, they're out of the office, and it just will really help you in putting on much better events. So it's going to look something like this when you're working your plan. You want to kind of break out how much staff time. This is kind of your expense budget. These are the categories. Again, this is very simple. There's many more categories that could be in this, but it is important that you kind of block out some staff time. You may not be able to do the cost, but it is important at least to do the hours. How much time, dedicated staff time, is going to be needed. And if you can do the cost, if you have that ability, I think it is helpful because it shows other people who are asking, what it costs. Because when I was an active fundraiser, man, the number of times that I got, some of the community was like, well, you should do this event and you should do that because and they don't realize, well, okay, that's a great idea, but do you know how much staff time it takes to do? Are you getting a consultant, design, printing, postage? You see the categories. Hopefully this isn't horribly new to all of you, but it's important that you break out each category for each of those events. Obviously, if it's a major gift strategy, you're not going to need to worry about all of these, but some of these you will. Like, let's take, for example, it's going to take some travel and transportation, or you're going to meet with a donor for, or let's say you're going to meet with a potential donor for dinner. Well, somebody's got to pay for that. Those are the little things that you don't want any surprises, is kind of the point of all that. Okay, so for each strategy you plan to use, fill out a separate page with the following information. I think we kind of went into that. For each strategy you plan to use, fill out a separate page with the following information: staying on track, steps to complete the strategy. So, like before, you've got each one. Now let's get into the deadline, the task, and who's responsible. So again, you can do this in different pages, but this is again where we're now getting down into the micro. We were doing macro. We built the plan, we built the goals, the numbers, and then we started assigning who's doing what's the purpose, and now it's deadline time. So put in a strategy. Again, I'm going to use an event as an example, or even if you're going to do, say, a donor appreciation event, work backwards. What's the date of the event, and what are all the things that need to happen? What are major deadlines? Who needs to be called? What needs to be reserved? And who's responsible. And then, check those off as you go. It's a great way. It's also a great way to work if you have staff, if you're fortunate enough to have staff, I should say. It's also a great way to, if they're working one of these plans, when you're meeting with them on a weekly or biweekly basis, when you already have a built-in agenda because they can just kind of show you what they're working on, what's been done, and then you can offer guidance and help as needed. So it's also a really great staffing tool for you as a nonprofit or a church leader to check in with folks. And then monitor your plan. I kind of talked about that a little bit. So regular review. It's important that you not just have a plan on paper and you bury it. In this day and age with the world of like Google Docs and here at Aplos we use cloud-based shared services so we can look at each other's projects and things like that. So it's a great way just to have access and looking at things regularly. Review each strategy and goal. How are we doing versus what we planned? And please know it's okay that things change. I mean, everything doesn't always go exactly as planned, but, are you prepared, to make any changes? And where do we need to adjust along the way? The most obvious example is you plan an event and you were hoping you were going to have 500 people and you realize that it was the same weekend as two other nonprofits, major events. And then you realize, we're only going to have 200 people. So, well, certainly we need to adjust the food. We need to, not plan for as many people and let's bring our budget down. But you want to do that soon enough so you're not stuck paying for things you don't have to use. So that would be an example of that. Things happen. I mean, I've worked in nonprofit long enough to know that, things that are completely out of our control. They can be weather related. They could be things of a national urgency. One of the, examples, one of the great examples I'll never forget is that I was working for a nonprofit and we had our one of our second biggest fundraisers of the year. And it just so happened that it was the Saturday after 9/11. And we didn't know what to do. And we actually ended up canceling that fundraising event because we just felt like the mood wasn't right. The people weren't ready for it. But that was a $200,000 event we had to make up for. So, we adjusted our plan and we moved the event. And it was okay. I mean, I won't say that was the best event ever, but it worked. So, making those adjustments, reviewing your plan. This is really important to me that you celebrate your victories. As a staff, fundraising is hard, it's tiring, it's exhausting. But it's also really important that you stop and celebrate what's going well because we don't do that enough. So as a staff, you monitor your plan when things go well, celebrate your victories together. Tell yourselves good job, as a team. So I like to, make sure you throw that in. So here's some final thoughts and resources that I hope you will find helpful. So as your organization develops, I think your plan and your fundraising strategies will. I think it's important that you the one of the things the plan will do is it will ensure buy-in from your board and staff in keeping your goals achievable, which will support your fundraising efforts. So creating a plan, following through with it, communicating your progress with your stakeholders and donors are the essential elements of a successful fundraising program. I cannot emphasize enough that, there's a lot of people kind of want a magic bullet when it comes to fundraising. But please, you got to know that it's hard work. You got to roll up your sleeves, but you got to do the work. Your plan it's a dynamic document. It's flexible to new opportunities and it's lessons learned. It's not supposed to be, well, we do it the same way every year, and you might have that, but it's also, like I said in the very beginning, it's a great way to look back and reflect and go, gosh, look what we did well, or gosh, for 3 years in a row, we're getting less and less people. Maybe it's time to, as they say on the Shark Tank, take it behind the shed and shoot it. That's a entrepreneurial term for maybe it's time to, do something different. And those are okay too. But I think you as a nonprofit leader know your stakeholders, your donors, your boards, but hopefully those are some things that can kind of get you along the way. There's some nonprofit leaders out there that I particularly appreciate and I respect. And I see here, I've got a list there. So look those up, Google them if you can. A lot of these folks have blogs, just like we have the Aplos webinar, and they're active on social media. So you can check them out as well. So So we're going to just take some time for a few questions, and then we'll kind of be done. So questions out there early in the day. So again, I want to remind everyone that the webinar is recorded, and we'll have that available for you both on our website, and we'll send you a link. Somebody asked, how often should you do a plan? Of course, I think you should do this process annually at the minimum. Of course, if you have new ideas that are coming in halfway through the year, you should certainly, do a new plan for each of those. But I think just like you do your budget, about the time you do your budget, you should be doing fundraising plans that match up to your budget. Other resources such as grants. Grants are a little bit of a different animal, but the Aplos Academy, we have a lot of resources there. You can Google fundraising plans, you can Google fundraising strategies. Lots of great books out there. The AFP, which is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, is a great organization. They have some free resources, but then they also have kind of a membership based, and you do have to pay for certain information. They have seminars and webinars and things like that. I would encourage you to get involved in any kind of local fundraising groups that are out there. I know that AFP has chapters throughout the country. You can look on their website to find out where they meet. And the idea with AFP is that the local fundraising and nonprofits get together and share best practices and resources to hopefully raise more money. My email is dan.kimball, Kimball, @aplos.com. And then also, if you are interested in more about Aplos, you can see we are a accounting and online donor management software for nonprofits and churches. So if you are just using Excel and you want some more information, you can check us out. We do these webinars free, of course. Suggestions for a fundraising event with one local board member. So it sounds like that the person asked this question sounds like that you have a regional board. I think that, if you can pull off some kind of regional event where you can, get together somewhere centrally located, possibly. I'd really emphasize using social media, online fundraising, that kind of thing would be a great tool. So that looks like to be the majority of the questions. So again, we want to thank you. We'll be back in February for another webinar. So you can, again, check out our webinar or our website for more information, more webinars, and I hope you find this valuable. Again, this will be available to you. So have a great rest of your day, your great rest of your week. Happy fundraising, and good luck. So thank you, everybody.